And we're now going to segue to Leslie Bocskor. Leslie, are you there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, there you are. Good morning, Leslie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well. Enjoying a beautiful Saturday morning here in sunny Las Vegas.
Fantastic. So Leslie is the chairman of Electrum Partners. He's been in the cannabis industry for a very long time. I want to say since 2010. Is that correct?
Well, you know, it depends upon what you mean. But really, I started to study it in 2010 when I moved to Las Vegas from New York. And then I really officially got in the industry after the election of 2012 when Colorado and Washington passed their ballot initiatives.
Fantastic. We are so excited to have you. And Leslie has had so much industry experience that he is delivering the CANNA World EXPO State of the Industry Address. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Leslie, and please shine some light on what's happening in the industry all around the world. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you for doing this. This is such an amazingly transitory time. We are, as a world, going through changes unlike anything that we had probably ever expected to see happen in our lifetimes. I mean, some of us maybe, but certainly I didn't. The world of humanity is changing in a way that, you know, I thought that I saw massive change when I was an investment banker covering the internet and new media back in the mid to late 90s, and this is just far beyond that. And I don't just mean, obviously, the industry, but the pandemic and what it is doing to how we are living. What are the major changes that we're going through? And I'm going to be doing a sort of a level set and framing how I'm going to be presenting where we are as an industry right now. And then I'll get into the meat of where the industry is and where it's going. And then, you know, I'll sort of wrap it up. The information of the revolution of the last 20 years has changed everything. Many of you may have heard of Marshall McLuhan. If you hadn't, I'd recommend reading him. He was a writer in the 60s, and he famously wrote, "The medium is the message." And we're now living through that. The technological revolution and information revolution of the 1990s has created an environment unlike anything we'd have expected. We're being forced, not always just figuratively, but sometimes literally, to evolve or perish. And it is presenting unusual challenges from a business perspective, a social perspective, a cultural perspective. The entire way we look at how things are going to change is really pretty massive, and how we're going to do business. Where the cannabis and hemp industries were prior to the beginning of this pandemic at the end of last year is actually not that different overall than where it is now. But there is a moment of confusion as a result of the catastrophic events we've been seeing on a global basis. And, you know, as they say, with chaos comes opportunity. And that is an opportunity to lead, it's an opportunity to contribute and to help make the world better. It's an opportunity to thrive. I don't know how many of you have heard of or ever attended something called Burning Man, but I've been going since 1998, although I missed the last couple of years and it was canceled this year. I bring up Burning Man because there was a very significant moment in the origin of the event. The last time that it was held, 2019, there were 78,000 attendees. There was over 400 events around the world that are evolved out of the event, some with 10 and 20,000 people. There are regional events and contacts all over the world, and it has affected culture in a global way that is not to be understood easily. When the first event happened in the Black Rock Desert in 1990, there were just 80 people. 2019, there were over 78,000 in the middle of the Black Rock Desert. The reason I bring this up is at the moment when those 80 people were in the Black Rock Desert getting ready to participate in the first Burning Man event ever out there, Michael, who's one of the founders, also known as Danger Ranger, his playa name, he drew a line in the alkali desert that was in front of all 80 people, and he asked everybody to hold hands. And he said, when we step over that line together, that's going to be the world we're building and creating, not the world we inherited. And they stepped over that line together, and the citizens of Black Rock City, which is what they became at that moment, that was when the beginning of calling the outside world the default world, and Burning Man the intentional world. Black Rock City is a world, a city, a culture built out of intention. Now, I bring that up because I want us, as I talk about this and as I get to the end of it, I want to retain that idea of intention and creating what really should exist, not necessarily what we've inherited, because this moment in time gives us that opportunity, and then the economics of the cannabis and hemp industry add an aspect to this that is beyond any gift any one of us could ever have anticipated receiving. The way we create the world with our businesses, our investments, our participation is going to be the cannabis and hemp industry world. That's going to be the world we create with our actions. It does not have to be the world we inherited. It does not have to be the default world. It can be the world of intention that we've created. And I know that sounds awfully esoteric. It's actually, it applies in a very significant way, and I'll show how. More than even when this industry started, and I've spoken all over about this, the opportunity the pandemic has created takes the opportunity that we had and leverages it even further. The opportunity we had was to create a new industry that was disrupting so many things: medicine, paper, plastics, fiber, cultural disruption, agriculture. These all were getting affected by this in a massive way, more than any other industry. It was affecting all of these industries prior to the pandemic. The pandemic actually gives us an opportunity to increase and to amp up that effect even more. So now so basically the premise of this is the opportunity now has been increased as a result of the pandemic, not diminished. Why? Well, there's a data point that I was just looking at recently. And this was just published a few weeks ago. The economic impact, not just the revenue of the cannabis industry, which is in 2020 expected to be, I don't know, $15 billion domestically. The economic impact total is expected to be about $66 billion. By 2024, in the United States alone, cannabis alone is expected to be $130 billion potentially in economic impact. That's just the cannabis industry, and that's primarily the cannabis adult use market. There is so much more to this than that. There is the fact that there is the cannabis industry. There is the fact that the cannabis industry has already established that it is unlike other industries in being counter-cyclical and recession-resistant, that it's been deemed an essential industry in numerous states during the pandemic, that it's growing even as so many other businesses are being shut down, that it hasn't had access to PPP money that so many other industries have had because it's federally illegal still, and yet the businesses are growing. One of the businesses I'm partners in here in Nevada and a co-founder of, our revenues were up year over year in June. Not down, not flat, up. What other industry other than the ones that were like Amazon, et cetera, can say that? Very, very few. We're recovering faster than other industries. We're changing so many other things, not just in adult use and medical use, but we're changing the perspective on pharmaceutical drugs. We're changing the perspective on therapies and on wellness and on how to treat things. The entire drug discovery process is being changed as a result of cannabis and looking at cannabis as a source for numerous pharmaceutical products that are being created. The truth is, once you get into the FDA process, it still takes time. But one of the major things we're finding with cannabis and whole plant-based therapeutics is that the costs are far less than it would be to do a small molecule drug discovery process. It has opened the door for so many other plant-based therapies. Look, I for one was asked specifically in 2014, do I expect that there's going to be legal psilocybin as a result of cannabis legalization? And I will tell you I was wrong. I flatly stated, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I was wrong. We're now seeing so many other things happen as a result of this, and it's changing again the world. So now we're not just looking at the cannabis industry, we're looking at the industries it's creating and enabling that weren't there before. The whole plant botanical route on drug development, again, never expected to be changed the way it had been, but now it is being looked at on an ongoing basis. Things like kratom are currently being explored. Wild lettuce is currently being looked at. All of these other plant-based therapies now are being treated with a higher degree of economic interest and scientific interest than they'd ever been treated before because of what cannabis did. Now, what does that mean for the industry and for the future? Well, I like to say that there are really a number of different industries, and the ones that I'm really highlighting now: adult use cannabis, medical marijuana, medical cannabis, which I think is going to really separate into traditional pharma-based products and then functional products. And then really it's going to be the adult use market of cannabis is not going to be like an adult use market for alcohol. It's going to be like something that we've never seen before, because the medical market will end up moving into that. What do I mean? You won't need to have a medical marijuana license and a medical marijuana establishment. Physicians will understand how to recommend the use of cannabis, just like they currently tell you to go take red yeast rice. There is no red yeast rice store or red yeast rice license. Red yeast rice is a statin. It's the same statin molecularly as lovastatin. Doctors tell you to take it rather than taking the pharmaceutical lovastatin, because you can go get it from a vitamin store. Well, in the same way, they're going to say you should go look at, go get some CBN or CBG, which is one of the cannabinoids in cannabis, for sleep or for inflammation, things like that. So the cannabis industry is really going to be the adult use market, which will be for wellness, it will be for recreational, it will be for many uses, and medical will fall more into pharmaceutical and then functional within the adult use market. The other industry that is extremely interesting and exciting to me is the hemp industry. And I don't just mean hemp for CBD and for CBG and CBN. I don't just mean hemp for cannabimovone, which is CBM, and it's another cannabinoid that's being looked at for its therapeutic properties, or cannabichromene, which is another one that's being looked at. I don't mean tetrahydrocannabivarin, which is like THCV. There's a tetrahydrocannabivarin, I don't remember the exact word, but like THC, cannabivarin, well, I don't remember the exact name, but CBDV is something that's being looked at for its blood sugar modulation, its ability to help people who are pre-diabetic or diabetic, and the effect that it can have. There are many of these other compounds that are currently being isolated, and plants are being bred to see these compounds expressed. So we're looking at hemp, a huge $20 billion industry of hemp as a source for wellness products. But that's not talking about the really big industry that hemp is going to be able to appeal to, or industries, I should say. The global plastics industry is $1.1 trillion a year. 1.1 trillion. The hemp plant is the most disruptive event to take place. The introduction of the hemp plant, or the reintroduction of the hemp plant into the global plastics industry, is the most disruptive event for that industry in its history. Henry Ford famously built a car partially on plant-based plastics. I know that a lot of people think that he built a car based on hemp. That's not true. He built a car based upon plant-based plastics partially, and said for many of an automobile's parts, plant-based plastics are far superior to steel and anything else that you can do. This is in the 40s. Well, obviously hemp's been illegal, so we haven't been able to approach the hydrocarbon-based plastics industry, the fossil fuel-based plastics industry, and say, can we possibly use hemp? Well, why is this significant? It's not just a better feedstock than oil. It's a renewable feedstock, and this is the component that is very important. Whether or not you believe in anthropogenic global warming or not, what I'm about to say is irrelevant. The use of fossil fuels for energy has brought enormous amounts of chemicals and heavy metals and carbon dioxide and more into our atmosphere. It's just a fact. We can use the hemp industry in plastics to become the largest carbon negative industry in the world, pulling the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, putting it into the hemp plant, making plastics out of the hemp plant that, by the way, don't biodegrade into toluene and benzene and other toxins when it goes into landfill. Put into landfill, essentially sequestering the carbon that was in the atmosphere back into the earth using hemp as a process to do it. It is a massive opportunity, 1.1 trillion. The global paper industry is $500 billion a year. The average US consumer uses 700 pounds of paper per year. And hemp is potentially and likely the most disruptive event for the paper industry since it was created as a global industry. The fiber industry, cotton, things like that, 700 billion a year. So between these three industries, we're talking about $2 to $3 trillion in revenue, not value. If you value those industries at 5 times revenue, you're talking about 10 trillion, 15 trillion in value for these industries on a global basis. And the hemp plant is the single most disruptive aspect of that we've seen. That presents opportunity for science development, for intellectual property, for agriculture, and for industry to once again be based upon these here in the US in a way we haven't seen in many, many years. States like Kansas, that was previously known as the hemp state, where there are hemp flowers on the crown molding of the Capitol in Topeka. Now we can start to see these states producing hemp for these reasons once again and seeing economic benefit from it. I know people like to talk about hemp for construction, which there will be as soon as somebody solves the problem. And I hope somebody who's listening to this and who does hear this will be able to solve this problem. The issue with hemp for hempcrete is that the solvents that are used to get rid of the excess cement that currently exists. So if you are in the cement industry, in the concrete industry, and you have concrete that is flash, that's hardened and excess, there are solvents to get rid of that, so you don't have to worry about excess concrete around there. You can make things smooth and quick because there's a solvent specifically for it. Hemp is such a durable plant that when you introduce it into hempcrete, we don't currently have the solvents that allow us to compete with concrete effectively. And so we need to see that solved. And when we do, that's another massive industry. Soon, and this is really what's critically important, the U.S. consumer, currently the U.S. citizen, currently 70% of them support the legalization of cannabis on a federal basis. We will see the descheduling of cannabis on a federal basis in the year, 2 years. When that really begins, the second session of Congress in 2021, when they finally say, okay, 73% of U.S. citizens now support the legalization of cannabis nationwide, at that point, the flood of money into these industries will be unlike anything any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. When I was an investment banker working on internet new media companies in the mid-90s, the total value of all publicly traded internet new media companies in 1995 was under $500 million. In the year 2000, the total value of all publicly traded internet and new media companies was $2.9 trillion. That's in year 2000 money. When we see the public markets open up, and that will allow capital to come into these industries, which currently it can't, because you can't get publicly traded companies that are nationally listed that are in the cannabis industry. And even the ones in the hemp industry have a challenge because it's still in this transitional period where we're seeing where Rick Cusick of formerly of High Times used to say is the artifacts of prohibition are still there, and they prevent treating these industries the way they should be treated, like other industries, and candidly, like the fastest growing, most positive industry that the world currently sees. Once that changes, because we start to see a law that deschedules it or legalizes it federally in some way, we'll see $10 trillion of public market value created in a 5-year period. And that's, I believe, starting in 2021 fall. So being prepared with your business as an investor, as a participant, to see what's going to happen as we see the public markets begin to open up is critical and will be a once in many lifetimes opportunity. We'll never have seen anything like this before. Not even the internet, new media will compare, and we will never see anything like it again. The unique aspects of this and the specific opportunities that exist because of what has happened before are not going to be repeated. Now, while this is all going on, the U.S., which is the reason cannabis is illegal federally, internationally, is the United States, because Harry Anslinger, who was the architect of the Marijuana Tax Act of the United States and made it illegal in the United States, also was the architect of the Single Convention Treaty of Narcotic Drugs at the UN in 1963, which made hemp and cannabis illegal internationally. Now, we're the ones that are creating the opportunity for it to be re-legalized internationally. And so Canada, obviously, the first major country, the first developed country to make it legal, Uruguay, the first country to make it legal on a federal basis, and now Mexico. Mexico is days, weeks, at most months away from federal legalization. I've been very fortunate to advise the country of Mexico. I was just on the phone with some of the stakeholders there recently, and we believe that Mexico is going to have a legal cannabis and hemp market in the immediate future, and we're very excited about that. Europe, Spain, France, Greece, and more are right on the verge of this. New Zealand, right on the verge of this. Thailand, right on the verge of this. And so when the international dominoes start to fall, they're going to all start to do it quickly, one after the other, similar to what happened in the United States, because they're going to realize they'll have all of the problems but none of the benefit if they don't have the industry domestically in the various countries. And so we're going to start to see an international industry coming over the next few years as well. So that $120 billion a year just in cannabis domestically, that's not Mexico, that's not Brazil, that's not Argentina, that's not Spain, Italy, France, England, Germany. That's just the United States. We're talking about trillions of dollars of value that are going to be developed internationally and businesses created on an international basis. So there's going to be wealth creation, there's going to be revenue creation, there's going to be jobs, there's going to be manufacturing and agriculture and science developed that has not been developed as a result of being involved in this. So what am I saying? I'm saying that hemp and cannabis are the most disruptive economic force today for the coming decades, changing our planetary business, economies, and culture. And we have an opportunity to shape that now. If we take a step back, think about how we want our businesses to function. How do we want to lead? How do we want to do business? Are we going to be purely bottom line driven, or are we going to be also culturally driven? Are we going to be the industries that have, just like, listen, I'm a capitalist through and through, and yet you can't deny that the divergence of wealth in the United States over the last few decades is destructive to our culture. It is, we have more and more people that are having to work harder and participating less in the wealth that's getting created, while a very small number of people are participating in enormous amounts of wealth that are getting created. Are we going to replicate that with the cannabis industry? Are we going to make 100 billionaires in the cannabis industry or in the hemp industry? Or are we going to work on creating a slightly flatter type of business structure where the people who help build the business in every aspect get to participate in it more? These are the choices we face as entrepreneurs and operators, as investors, and as consumers. Where do we spend our money? Where do we invest our money? And how do we operate our business? This will allow us to create new paths for the world that we're living in. It will allow us to change the world that we live in. Do we want to be part of medical aspect? Do we want to be part of agriculture? How do we want to change all of these things? We can choose these things, and now is the time. To do that, we must be extraordinarily diligent, we must be intentional in what we do, and we must be willing to exhibit leadership as consumers, as investors, as operators. You must be willing to and interested in doing that. I'm not sure that everybody is, but I, for one, am. So I am asking all of you, everyone who's listening to this, to take my virtual hand, cross over into the future of our industry and business in general, because this pandemic has created that opportunity, like the Black Rock Desert for Burning Man at that first event. We can cross over into the future and choose the world we're going to live in, because the economic heft that this industry gives us is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And now we can go in and build a world that is more reflective of our values and of what we'd like to see and what should exist. And I hope that we can all do this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, so much for that incredibly important message. And we've had a question come up for you. Tasha,
Sure.
Are you there?
Yeah, hi, Leslie. How are you doing today?
Fantastic.
It's very nice to meet you. There is one question from one of our attendees. Are there going to be hemp biofuel projects in the U.S.?
Absolutely. Well, biofuel. So the answer to that is that's an area I am not as confident about, because the economics of biofuel are less dependent on the hemp plant and more dependent upon logistics. Biofuels are more about how you create the infrastructure for the creation of the biofuel and the delivery of it, not just about the plant itself. Certainly, hemp could be a great source of biodiesel and biofuels. As a feedstock, it is one of the best plants. It grows quickly. It has an enormous amount of the right compounds in it. The issue has to do with the processing facilities and the infrastructure to deliver the output to the consumer of it. And so we need to look at the infrastructure issues for it, and that's where the challenge really lies, which is similar to paper, but in paper there are also there's existing infrastructure, and it's similar enough to the pulp paper industry that it doesn't engage in the problems. The competition between biofuel and oil, traditional hydrocarbon fossil fuels, is where the issue lies, not in the creation of biofuel from hemp. Does that answer the question?
I believe it does.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I said
that's because I turned my volume down because of the echo. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Leslie, so much for providing the State of the Industry address. And how can people reach you after this presentation?
So they can reach me. My Twitter account is my name, Leslie Bocskor, Leslie Bocskor. My website, so that's once again, Leslie Bocskor. My website, the Electrum Partners business, is www.electrumpartners.com. That's the primary way to reach me, through that or through Twitter. And there are a couple of things I'm working on, so there will be other ways to reach me in the very near future. And there's some exciting projects coming that I've been working on for a while and I've been very quiet about. And so look to both Twitter and to my website to find out information about those and anything else I'm doing.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
My pleasure. It was an honor participating.
Taking the time. Thank you. And thanks for taking the time and coming at us live from Las Vegas in North America, United States of America.